بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome again to the series of talks on the virtues of Masjid Al-Aqsa. To do that, I'd just like to read you a poem. Sweet earth of Palestine, wherever I went, carrying the burning scars of your humiliation, nursing in my heart the longing to make you proud, your love, your memories went with me. The promise of your blessing went with me, in distant lands on dark lanes, in alien cities on nameless streets. Wherever the banner of my blood unfurled, I've left a desire for you. Your enemies destroyed one Palestine, my wounds created many more. Alhamdulillah, this love for Masjid Al-Aqsa also rebuilds within this ummah and us through the pits that are connected with Masjid Al-Aqsa. And of course, all these names of these prophets and their incidences are narrated in the Holy Quran, making it that much more important for us to understand the centrality of Masjid Al-Aqsa, its virtues and its importance to us. Now, the greatest of the prophets that have ever lived or passed in the past have been blessed by having their presence in Masjid Al-Aqsa. Hence, the significance of Al-Aqsa in Palestine is further enhanced by the presence of the noble prophets and major events that occurred during their lifetime. And one of the greatest prophets, Khalilullah, the friend of Allah, Prophet Ibrahim al-Islam, we've mentioned him again earlier before, but we need to understand how he's connected to Masjid Al-Aqsa in detail. Prophet Ibrahim al-Islam migrated from his hometown of Ur in modern-day Iraq with his wife Sarah and his nephew Lut, and they moved towards Palestine and settled there. And the reason they had to move is, if we recall from the incidents that are narrated in the Holy Quran, that he wanted to preach the Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala while his people were building idols and worshipping idols. And he was, because he destroyed all the idols and left an axe in the largest of the idol, and when the people came and asked him as to, and they suspected he had done it, and asked him why he had done, he asked them to question the idol. And of course they also accepted that the idol would not be able to answer them. And then thereafter they built a big fire in which they threw Ibrahim al-Islam, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala quenched the burning qualities of the fire, saved him, and thereafter asked him to migrate. And the place Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks him to migrate is to the land of Palestine. And of course this is also the first time in the Holy Quran is historically concerned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that he has bestowed his blessings for all the world upon the land of Palestine. And this is where he asked Ibrahim al-Islam to migrate. Ibrahim al-Islam was stationed in and around Masjid Al-Aqsa, and from there he made different journeys. And in one episode he goes to Egypt, and while he's in Egypt, a tyrannical leader was attracted to his wife Sarah al-Islam and tried to seduce her. However, Allah protected him and Sarah al-Islam, and they were left unharmed. I don't want to narrate the whole story, but in Egypt, then he gets married to his second wife Hajra al-Islam, and with Hajra al-Islam and Sarah al-Islam they return back to Jerusalem, where they live for many years. There Ibrahim al-Islam then is granted children. Some narrations state that at the age of 80 Hajra al-Islam bore him a son, and Ibrahim al-Islam then is commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take his wife Hajra and his son Ismail to the Arabian desert, modern day Makkah, and to leave them there. He followed the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, leaves his wife Hajra and Ismail al-Islam, and returns back to Palestine. And this is the important part. This is the part we don't tend to emphasize or to look into. That Ibrahim al-Islam, when he was commanded to leave his wife Hajra and Ismail, he was residing in and around Jerusalem. After he had left them in Mecca, he then returns back to Jerusalem, in and around Jerusalem. Ibrahim al-Islam, obviously the story of Hajra and Ismail, then of course the water of Zamzam, and then Ibrahim al-Islam later goes back to Hajra al-Islam when his son Ismail is much older, and together father and son they're commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to rebuild the Kaaba, which they do. However, with his second wife Sarah, who remained in Palestine, she also becomes pregnant in her old age, and a second son is born, and the second son, his name is Ishaq al-Islam. And in Holy Quran it says, and we gave him the good news of Ishaq, a prophet among the righteous ones. This good news of the birth of Ishaq was given to Ibrahim al-Islam in Palestine when he was approximately 100 years old. And Ishaq lived with his father in and around Jerusalem, where he preached, where he traded, eventually grew old and died. And the graves of Ibrahim al-Islam and Ishaq al-Islam are very near Jerusalem, in the city of Al-Khalil. Unfortunately today it's known by its modern name of Hebron. But those who are fortunate enough to make ziyarah of Masjid Al-Aqsa can go to Al-Khalil and visit the graves of Ibrahim al-Islam and Ishaq al-Islam. But the important factor here, which I wish to emphasize, as Ibrahim al-Islam rebuilt the Kaaba with his son Ismail al-Islam, he also, when he returned back to Jerusalem with his other son Ishaq al-Islam, he rebuilds Masjid Al-Aqsa. Remember, we mentioned earlier that the first time Masjid Al-Aqsa is built is by Adam al-Islam. Now we see that after time, of course, it's the same way the Kaaba was destroyed, and Ibrahim al-Islam rebuilds it with his other son, with his son Ismail al-Islam. In Jerusalem, Ibrahim al-Islam rebuilds Masjid Al-Aqsa with his son Ishaq al-Islam. And this is very significant, that the continuation of the two masajid, the Masjid al-Haram in Makkah and Masjid Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem, are going in tandem. From the earliest hadith we heard that it was Adam al-Islam who had built the two masajids right at the beginning of time, right at the beginning of creation of humanity. Now when Ibrahim al-Islam, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings Ibrahim al-Islam to this earth and gives him the Nabuwa, he is then appointed and honored to having to rebuild the Haram of Makkah. With Ismail al-Islam and with his another son Ishaq al-Islam, he builds Masjid Al-Aqsa. As I mentioned earlier, Ibrahim al-Islam passes away in a place very near Masjid Al-Aqsa in Al-Khalil, where he is buried. And his son Ishaq al-Islam then, of course, has son Yaqub al-Islam. And from Yaqub al-Islam, we know the other name of Yaqub al-Islam was Israel, and that's why the children of Israel, his progeny, are known as Banu Israel. And of the many sons of Yaqub al-Islam, one of the sons that we are very familiar with was Yusuf al-Islam, with a great surah in the Holy Quran, and again an incident where he's taken as a slave because his brothers discard him in a well. A caravan comes along, picks him up, and they take him as a slave and sell him as a slave boy into Egypt. And he, again, we don't want to narrate the whole incident of Yusuf al-Islam, but there's a great connection also of Yusuf al-Islam with Palestine. The fact that he was born in and around Jerusalem, is taken to Egypt, where then after many years and many incidents, he ends up as a wazir, as a governor of Egypt. And famine besets Palestine. So Yaqub al-Islam asks his sons to go out and search for food. And where do they end up? They end up on the doorstep, on the foot of Yusuf al-Islam. Yusuf al-Islam recognizes them as his brothers, and then he grants them many goods to take to his father, but he asks them to bring the whole family into Egypt, without not knowing to them that is Yusuf. When Yaqub al-Islam with his sons come to Egypt, he embraces them and then starts residing in Egypt. And hence now you see the movement of all the people from the time of Ibrahim al-Islam, the people who believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through and those who believed him, Yaqub al-Islam and the Banu Israel, have now moved from the region of Palestine into Egypt. And they remain in Egypt for a very long period of time, until on one side the coming of Fir'aun, and on the other side coming of Musa al-Islam. Now Musa al-Islam, of course, has got the Holy Quran, I think is one of the prophets who's been mentioned most in the Holy Quran. And many verses regarding Musa alayhi salam are connected indirectly or directly with the land of Palestine and Baytul Maqdis. The Banu Israel, of course, are being persecuted by Fir'aun, and Musa alayhi salam is directed and asked to take them from Egypt back into Palestine. And it is very interesting for us to understand that when Musa alayhi salam is asked to do this, the land that is referred to is not referred to as a promised land, but it's referred to as the Holy Land, a land that has been made precious and blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for whole of humanity. It is not a land that has been granted to one group of people, unlike how it is narrated in other texts, and misleading the people. The fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows this. The biography of, as I mentioned, the biography of Musa alayhi salam is long, but in brief, that after Fir'aun began the persecution, Musa with his brother Harun guided the Banu Israel to flee from Egypt towards Palestine. After crossing the Red Sea, the Fir'aun and his men died, and Banu Israel began to argue and protest at the lack of water, food and shade. And Musa alayhi salam prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all the three to be provided, the water, food and shade. And after these favors were bestowed upon them, they continued with their ingratitude until they arrived on the outskirts of Palestine. And Musa alayhi salam then commands them to enter the Holy Land, as I mentioned to you earlier, mentioned in the Holy Quran. But nevertheless, they again remonstrated against him, and they turned around to Musa and said that you go and fight them, and we will go after you afterwards. And this is a great affront to Musa alayhi salam. Although despite the fact that Musa alayhi salam had assured them of a victory to assault the city, but they would not go. They simply said, you and your Lord go, and we will stay behind. And Musa alayhi salam was aggrieved. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then punishes them for 40 years, where they remain in wilderness without finding their way, and until a time came when Musa alayhi salam's death was called upon. It was time for him to go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's a hadith on the authority of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, who says that an angel of death was sent to Musa. When he came to Musa, Musa slapped him on the eye. The angel returned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and said, you have sent me to a servant who does not want to die. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the angel, return to him and tell him to put his hand on the back of an ox, and for every hair that will come under it, he will be granted 1 year of life. Musa alayhi salam said, O Lord, what will happen after that? Once the angel came back to Musa alayhi salam and instructed him that this is what you need to do. Then Musa alayhi salam said, what will happen after that? Allah replied, then death. Musa declared, let it be now. Musa alayhi salam then requested, O Allah, let me die close to the promised land, to the sacred land, the holy land, the blessed land, so much so that he would be at a distance of a stone's throw away. And then a hadith in Sahih Bukhari adds that Abu Hurairah says, the Prophet ﷺ said, if I were there, meaning if the Prophet ﷺ was there, he would show us the grave, the red sand hill on the side of the road. In fact, that even Musa alayhi salam, despite being aware that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was not going to give him the opportunity of extension to his life, and he would not see the victory of Baytul Maqdis, he prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he dies near Masjid Al-Aqsa and surrounding of Al-Quds. And this is a great prophet like Musa alayhi salam also is aware of the great blessing of this land, and he's making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that yes, oh Allah, I want to be with you, my time has come, but take my soul away, take my life when I'm close to the sacred land, to the holy land, to the blessed land. And Prophet ﷺ said, if I were there, I would have shown you the grave of Musa alayhi salam. And for us, it's very significant that this great prophet of Allah is seeking and making dua that he should die near Masjid Al-Aqsa. Subhanallah. So we see the connection through Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam and his children, and then Musa alayhi salam, again, the connection of Masjid Al-Aqsa, and how they're all connected, and how this is brought to life for us through the Holy Quran, and how when we go there to Palestine, when we make ziyarah, all this incidences and episodes that teach us so many things of our life and how we should function come to reality and come to an essence, and we can touch the Holy Quran in its physical context. And this is the greatness of Masjid Al-Aqsa and the land of Baytul Maqdis. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.